buy gas and liquefied natural gas as a bloc rather than individual countries. And I mean, that's a first significant step towards ending reliance on Russian supplies. And we'll see why in a minute.
Okay.
EU member states plan to begin buying liquefied natural gas cargoes jointly as a bloc instead of as individual countries, following a formal deal signing later this week. The bloc will outline rules for the collective purchases, which aim to end reliance on Russian suppliers. Brussels will look to the US and Qatar as it reduces Moscow's share from the current 40% of its supplies. The bloc will also compel all member states to fill at least 90% of their storage facilities before next year. But EU members have yet to reach an agreement on fuel prices. Spain, Greece and Portugal and others want to cap price hikes. Germany, Denmark and the Netherlands oppose government intervention. For more on this, let's now go to Youssef Al-Shamari. He is CMarkits CEO. Many thanks for being with us today. Youssef, how significant really is this step for the bloc in its aim to reduce or even end reliance on Russian suppliers?
Well, thanks for having me. Well, I guess that's what should have been happening. In fact, the EU, one of the weaknesses in the EU energy sector is that there is no unified energy policy. And that's what has actually made the transition a lot slower, because we have very much divided energy policy across the European Union, whether it's in Germany and France and Netherlands or Switzerland. And I think this is the first steps towards making the energy sector in the EU far more resilient than what we have seen before. Now, when it comes to the unifying the policy or having the purchases or the imports as a bloc, I think here there are something like 2 million barrels of oil that comes from Russia. And on top of that, there are between 2 to 3 million barrels that comes as petroleum products, also mainly that comes from Russia. Now, if we have alternative suppliers like Qatar or the US, I think here there would be a far more, let's say, a more smoother transition toward reducing dependence on Russian supplies, given the tragedy what's happening now in Ukraine. And I think that will also enable the European countries to have far more and easier agreements among themselves when it comes to reducing their dependence on Russia. Because if we look at, for example, Finland, something like 80% of their energy supplies come from Russia, Lithuania or Belarus, while Germany is just something like 30%. So I think here this is a very important step towards reducing dependence on Russia.
Interesting, Youssef, as you say, more coordination now, more resilience within the European Union. But how difficult would it really be for Europe to find alternative sources in the short term, but also in the medium to longer term, especially for the countries you're mentioning, I mean, Finland, but also Germany, the Netherlands, Poland? Some countries rely for more than 90%, 80% on Russian oil and gas. How difficult would it be?
Well, I don't think it's very easy to implement that or to wipe off Russian supplies very quickly, because if we look the alternatives, where is the spare capacity? Qatar might have some spare capacity left when it comes to gas. Maybe the Algeria, but for Algeria, I think there needs to be a construction of a pipelines. So perhaps Qatar and Algeria, but that needs some long-term contract. And also because Qatar, you're mainly exposed to India and China and Asian countries. So there needs to be long-term contracts signed with Europe that can replace their current customers. And so this is somewhat if we talk about Russia. Then we also have Algeria that needs the infrastructure. That's in terms of gas. But in terms of oil, I think this is the trickiest part, because very limited spare capacity left, and that's mainly contained in Saudi Arabia and the Gulf countries. One tricky part here is that the Russian oil isn't easily replaced by any supplier. And European refineries are very much configured to process Russian oil. That kind of oil that is medium density, that gives you far more diesel compared to alternative crude. So in bottom line, the US cannot replace Russian oil. So you need Saudi Arabia or Middle Eastern oil. Perhaps they would think about Iran or other alternative oil coming from the Middle East, perhaps even Venezuela. But I think this is not an easy part over the long term. And I don't see a quick solution towards replacing Russian oil supplies in the meantime. But perhaps they can go away with gas much quicker.
Interesting. As you say, very complicated, more so for oil than gas. Youssef Al-Shamari, many thanks for being with us today.
Always a pleasure.
Switching to an energy source.